don't know you, is an investment manager. We're specializing in retail property, and we are invested across Europe. To us, sustainability is obviously about making our properties, the properties we manage for various investor clients, future-proof. But not only that, because we believe that as creators of retail experiences, we also need to contribute in our redevelopment projects or in our efforts to make certain areas more livable, that we provide citizens who live there not only with the best retail experience, but actually retail experience becomes part of a mix of living there comfortably, having enough leisure activities. So it's not only the environmental impact of our properties, but also the impact that we have on the communities where we are invested in.
Okay, great. And Maarten, maybe if you just give the perspective as well, because I know the RSS have been very active in a number of these areas related to both sustainability, but also to that sense of cities and well-being and those kinds of aspects.
Yeah, RSS being the non-for-profit organization worldwide that tries to improve transparency, ethical behavior, and professionalism in the built environment sector worldwide. Of course, if you look at ethics, ethical behavior, that ties in closely with sustainability, because in the end, I always try to take a holistic approach, meaning that, well, if you behave ethical, automatically you also behave sustainable. At least that should be the case for me. Having said that, like Richard already touched upon, RSS is also, in order to maintain this role and this position in the global market space, we need to do a lot of research and thought leadership development. And one of the themes that we are currently focusing on is indeed smart cities, sustainable cities, next to, for example, ethics, but also digitization and big data and infrastructure, for example.
Great, Nicole.
Hello, I'm from Catella, and we focus on Catella on sustainability concept over the last year. We developed a monitoring system with different components like social, economical, but ecological as well. And therefore we can use this rating system for our transaction process, but we are focused especially on the maintenance, on the management rating afterwards, so we can still keep our properties sustainable and make them more sustainable. This is our main focus at Catella.
Okay, great. Stuart.
Yes, thank you very much. As Richard mentioned, Scottish Cities Alliance is a collaboration of the 7 cities in Scotland, and sustainability and taking care of the long term is very much at the centre of what we're about. The Scottish Government has very ambitious targets for carbon reduction, for example. The target of 42% reduction on 1990 levels was already met, so they're increasing that to a 90% target. We're doing a lot of work in terms of cities around things like improving cycling. We've also got a lot of smart cities activity, some hydrogen demonstration projects, and I guess in terms of sustainability as well, reusing existing buildings, because a lot of the carbon emissions do come from buildings, and we need to look at how we can retrofit them and also how we can build new, excellent, environmentally friendly buildings.
Okay, great. Boris.
Hi, Boris from the Gijp, Syntrus Achmea, investing on behalf of over 60 institutional clients in the Netherlands, with a portfolio focused in the Netherlands, but also with a portfolio of shopping and housing in Germany and France. What we see with our clients is that sustainability is, for the most clients, is as important as is the total return. And even for some clients, I think sustainability is more important than the total return they receive on their portfolios. That's causing us to have a really big scheme on sustainability, both focused on new developments, but also looking for possibilities to improve existing buildings. And for new developments, carbon neutral is for our clients already a standard issue.
Okay, good. I wanted to pick up with you just on that point, just taking a kind of broader macro picture, because you're obviously head of research at Syntrus. There's obviously has been a macro trend just generally for urbanisation, and that's not restricted to Europe by any means. That's restricted, that's across the world really. I mean, how do you see, when you're looking at it, how do you see the idea of the cities effectively competing with each other, and how do they make themselves more attractive for investment generally?
I think every city is trying to do its best on their own, and I think the hour before you had a discussion about resilient cities, so to be flexible, to give the right answers on what's the problem of those individual cities. And I think that's the case for most European cities, all facing their own challenges, all facing their own problems. In the general case is a huge demand for more housing projects. And for those housing projects, well, it's more or less the same in all Europe. It should all be carbon neutral. It should all be, always be targeted at the right consumer group, and always those projects not only there for the short term, but also always with a long-term perspective.
Okay, good. And Stuart, from your perspective, you're obviously actively engaged in reaching out to investors. What are the things that you find investors are looking for in terms of their ability to invest in you? Is it aspects like affordability? Is it about well-being? Is it about some of those kind of softer investment issues that have actually appeared an awful lot in the discussion so far over the 2 days?
Yeah, I think that's really important, Richard. One of the reasons people come to Scotland, obviously, is a great quality of life, and they can get out. Our cities are all mostly relatively small, so you can get out into the countryside around very quickly. Increasingly, investors are looking, obviously, for good returns. They want to see good returns, but they also are looking to the long term. So it's not just about a quick investment in and out. It's really about the long-term view. I think Priscilla's got a good example of projects in Glasgow where she's invested, and her company are looking at, they've taken on older buildings, many of which from the 19th century, and they're investing in the architectural, the built heritage, but they're bringing them up to modern standard, and those are the sorts of places people like to go. We're also very focused on creating walkable cities and places that people are able to get around easily on foot. Cycling as well, there's a big push. Scottish Government's just invested over £20 million in some cycling projects around, trying to get a bit more like Holland as an example. We've had some really good input from professionals from Holland. So yeah, people are looking at the rounded picture, quality of life. Also, increasingly with the ageing workforce, it's looking at referrals from colleagues as a way of recruiting. So young folk are interested, if they find a nice place to live and work, then that has a snowball effect through things like social media. So a lot of these aspects, I think, are becoming more and more important.
And I know, Priscilla, you as well as the Glasgow one, there have been other investments that you've had. Just maybe in terms of that sort of, when you're looking more closely at investing in a specific city, what makes it attractive for you, and do you try to then work with the city to build on those things? Yeah,
I think that's certainly what we try to do in most cases, but maybe to come back to your point about quality of living, it sort of underwrites our conclusions of a city ranking that we do yearly. Obviously, as an investment manager, we are trying to rank the cities where we would like to invest in. And what we see is that cities that are doing well on the sort of soft factors, so the quality aspects of it, pleasant living areas, lots of cultural heritage, musea, touristic points of interest, that also reflects in those cities performing better on an economic level. So it actually, when you come back to quality and making returns, it also adds to cities' attractiveness and chances that your investment over there will deliver the returns that you are expecting. So in terms of your question, working with municipalities and trying to make areas or cities a bit more livable, we have a perfect example in Brighton where we bought an old department store, and we bought some adjacent properties that are already leased, and we are now trying to create a new lane, as Brighton has the lanes, and add to the city's mix of not only retail but also leisure, gastronomy, etc.
Okay, good. I'm going to come to you in a minute, Nicole, just in terms of the sustainable funds and how you judge those. But Maarten, are you beginning to see a change in terms of how, because obviously RICS is a lot about advisory and valuation and looking for transparency. Do you think a number of these soft factors are beginning to be taken much more seriously by your members in terms of how they're valuing and looking at properties?
I think that's certainly the case, Richard. First of all, it started with sustainability criteria being taken into account in valuations, but now new concepts like well-being are coming up, and they also in the end need to be taken into account. For sure.
Okay, great. And Nicole, just in terms of how you're structuring it, because you've got specific funds that are focused on sustainability and sustainable investment. Can we just, how do you judge those? What are your criteria for those funds?
As I mentioned before, we were developing a rating system, a Catella rating system, and we have like the three components, as always in sustainability, the social component, the ecological and the economical component, and we have like 240 parameters, and with them we are equally weighted all the components to get together a rating for our properties. But the thing is, we don't only invest in properties who have already a certain really high level of sustainability. We try to get them better during the management phase. So we re-rate every property over like half a year, always again. So we try to monitor and make them better in sustainability. And I just wanted to say a quick thing about the soft factors Priscilla mentioned. Part of our rating system is a city rating system, which has as well the three components of the sustainability. And there is a good example. You said the cities who have high focus on soft factors for livability of people are totally better for investment. And like Münster is like called the livability city, in the most livability city in the world. In our rating system, where we measure ecological, economical factors as well, is Münster is one of the top cities in our rating system of Germany. So I think it's true. First you have to have a focus on the soft factors, and then everything else will come with it, because the people want to live there, and the population is the most important thing for the city.
I just learned in a panel that I was attending on Moscow City that in Dubai they now have hired a chief happiness officer for the city to make sure that people are happy in the city that they live in.
A chief happiness officer. Do you have one yet, Stuart?
Yeah,
you look happy.
Everybody's happy in Scotland.
Everyone's happy in Scotland.
No, I think just the point about quality of life. Actually, in rankings across the UK, Scotland always comes out very highly, Scottish cities. And in FDI investment, we're second only to London and the South East across the UK. So quality of life and investment do go together.
Okay, good. And Boris, have you, picking up some of these soft factors, is that coming more into your investment strategy in recent times? Has it always been something? I mean, the Dutch have often been quite far forward in terms of looking at these sides, but is that beginning to affect your investment strategy more, or is this position still the same for you?
No, it's really changing very fast. For our investment strategy to measure it, we are using the Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark, GRESB benchmark. Unfortunately, for our investment in Germany, there's another benchmark, so I think there's maybe a task for the RICS to achieve, to get a European standard for to measure sustainability. But with our clients, I think our debates on sustainability and how to become number one or number two in the GRESB index within their sector is more intensively than we have debates on return. So having talks with our customers, well, in fact, today, but also in these weeks, how much money are they willing to invest in solar panels, in what's the value of a carbon neutral house, where are the possibilities to buy obsolete buildings, transform them in residential units. That's all main topics in the portfolio schemes we're conducting at the moment.
Okay, good. Stuart, when you, I mean, I know because as well as the sort of sustainable investment, longer term investment, but you've invested as a country, and let's look at the cities within that context, particularly in a lot of sustainability initiatives, both in terms of power and those kinds of things. How much of that do you think creates an overall view of a kind of positive investment case? How important is that?
Yeah, I think if you look at the UK, for example, 26%, or almost a quarter of all the renewable energy in the UK comes from Scotland. And we've also got around about half our electricity is coming from renewables now, with a target to get that to 100% by 2020, so it's pretty close. So I think that does create a positive investment environment, because people think that we're behaving responsibly towards the planet, but also showing concern about the environment that we have. And I think that does lead to a lot of interest. It also creates the research opportunities for the universities, but it also brings in companies like Siemens, who are based in Germany, that are very active in Scotland, RWE, another German company, very active in my part of Scotland as well. So it does bring investors, in addition to just being a good thing to do for the planet. And I also think for young people, they're increasingly concerned about this sort of issue. So talking to some people yesterday around how they got here, and people were saying, well, it's a bit difficult. Really, from Scotland, you have to fly, but others talking about they prefer to use the train, even a colleague who come by bus to avoid having to fly. So people are concerned about this, and I think it does then play into a good, strong case for investment if you're seen to be concerned about your environment. On renewables, we're really strong on tidal energy as well, which is one of the things that is around us in the world, but we're not using very much of at the moment.
Okay, Maarten, you want to take that up?
Yeah, I'm a bit surprised, because Nicole was talking about Münster, Stuart is talking about Scotland. That's not Berlin or London for that matter. How does that work in terms of urbanization?
Well, just in terms of London, I think the pressures on some of those places do create opportunities for places nearby, and indeed for places like Scotland, because investors are saying it's increasingly difficult to recruit. The recruits that they do have find it expensive to live there. So it does create opportunities for other places. And good flight connectivity, we've got excellent flight connectivity down to London, and also improving rail services, and that makes it more attractive. And I guess in the UK context, some of the city deals that have been developed are about trying to attract investment from London into the regions.
Okay, good. Nicole, just in terms of the investors that are coming into those sustainable funds, have you seen a rise in that? I mean, is the product driven by demand, in the sense that a lot of the pension funds, a lot of the capital is specifically looking for this type of investment?
I would say, yeah, it's driven by demand, because many investors are thinking differently than like 10 years ago. Maybe sometimes it's a little bit idealistic, but I think they are looking for a long-term investment. On short-term, maybe you could have a little bit of a disadvantage, because big markets like US or maybe China now is changing the way of thinking, are not going the same way. But I think in the long term, you're better with sustainable investment, and that is why investors are changing their thinking right now.
Okay, good. One of the things, just with you, Priscilla, is obviously this started with things like BREEAM and certification, so that there was standardization across the industry to say this is a sustainable building. But we kind of, I guess, have moved on from that now. How do Redevco see that? Is it a starting point for you, or is it, because you're actively aiming to green your portfolio?
Yeah, that's true. I think it's a good question also, because we're here in GRESB, BREEAM, we have different standards. I think that's one of the things that is a challenge probably in the industry, is also to agree upon what is sustainable investment. We all have our different angles and our different views on that, but in the end, I'm assuming that all of us are reaching for the same goal. But that's difficult, and for us, we've chosen BREEAM as our standard to monitor the progress of future-proofing and adding quality to our buildings. So it's, for us, it's a starting point rather than an end point. So the certificate on its own is nothing really. It's just a status. And from there, like Nicole also said, we are trying, you can sort of measure where you stand with your property and then try and add quality to that and future-proof that. And we use it really as an asset management tool and not as a goal in itself.
Okay, good. I wanted to pick up some of the earlier points, maybe starting with you, Boris, just in terms of, we've had a session earlier on technology, but also on what cities can do. One of the things that came up also in the session we've just had about the future of office was what happens with design to make them more user-friendly for people. How do you, so the livability, attracting talent becomes much more important. Do you see positive ways for cities to be able to use these kinds of technologies, this smart cities movement, to create a more sustainable investment? And by that I mean not just investing in sustainability, but something that gives you a higher return or a more future-proof return over time?
Yeah, I do. The discussion just now was about resilient cities. I'm a very big fan of the ideas of resilient buildings, flexible buildings, and flexibility for me meaning that the building can change towards the desires of the consumers, and when you can play on the things consumers want, you can add value to your buildings. So that's the way we manage our buildings. Adding amenities when it's adding value to the building. Sometimes investing in public space, not because the investment in public space is a healthy business case, but the investment in public space helps our buildings to improve in value. So, and data is very important to understand what consumers want, how they move, and to see the trends. So it helps us understanding better. But that is also very important to communicate with our clients. So, well, these are the trends, and this is the way you have to invest. And at the end of the day, it's helping us to generate value.
And in terms of, for you, Stuart, just in terms of investor demand changing and those kinds of things, how much, and Priscilla also mentioned a desire to kind of collaborate with the cities in order not just to improve the individual asset or the individual building, but actually place that and help the cities with the whole area so it creates sustainable investment for that asset that they've got. How important is that collaboration for you in terms of the investors and building a partnership almost, I suppose, with the investors?
Yeah, I think very important. We've also got a collaboration across the cities. So the 7 cities, we've got a Smart Cities European Regional Development Fund project, which is about £10 million. We're doing quite a lot of things around smart building management, renewable energy technology. We've got a really interesting project with older people, which is sensor technology in housing for older people, which monitors their health and monitors how they're behaving in the house, and that can pick up early signs of potential falls or heart difficulties, other things. So it's quite an interesting one because of the demands of the health care sector. So, but we want to work with investors who are interested in the long-term future of their buildings and using it as a demonstrator as well. So I think Priscilla was talking about some of the investments that they do and how they work with the local authorities, because we want to use these sorts of examples to promote that more widely and demonstration effect. So BREEAM Excellent, for example, we have a new government agency based in our town, in the city, and that achieved BREEAM Excellent, and that had a knock-on effect on the rest of development in and around. So I think that the benchmarking that provides is very useful in terms of raising the bar, and also private housing as well. Increasingly now people are saying, what's this going to cost me to run? And we've got houses in the Highlands, which is a very cold part of Scotland, where you're paying less than £100 a year because they're so well insulated, often using German technology actually, so well built that they need very, very little heating. So all of this does play into raising the game, raising the investment opportunity as well.
Okay, good. And Nicole, in terms of the fund, you obviously then look at which cities are more investable. Do you also then try and reach out to those cities? Are there ways that there's communication with you and the cities, you as an investor in the cities, about what the opportunities are, how they can position themselves better to be higher up your ranking and therefore attract more investment?
Until now we don't do this, but I think in the future it would be really good. Like we had a discussion before, is cooperation better, or is competition better between the cities? I think it should be something like a mix. If the cities know where they are in the rating, what they can do, on which part they have their legs, maybe a bit of a competition would be good. So, but because I think sometimes it brings the best out of everybody, but I think a cooperation of all the cities would be for the future as well really good. So I think we should do something like this to work with the cities, but until now it's just a start, it's just started, and so we didn't do it.
Okay, good. And it sounds as though there's a role for the RICS about to come forward, Maarten. I don't know whether that's more work you want. I just wanted to pick up with you, Boris, how much of this is about capital and investors wanting this? How much of it is it an opportunity, and how much is it more about de-risking your investment?
I think last year it was about de-risking, but it's getting more and more an investment opportunity, because when we look at transforming our positions in houses from EPC's, from not energy efficient to energy efficient, there's a business case for those kind of investments at the moment, and it allows us to improve our houses, being of course a more interesting investment on the long run, and that's meaning less risk, but also giving us a sound return in those investments. And that, for the last years, that was a different game, because then you really had to invest, and you were not able to gain the benefits. But now that game is changing. We're now benefiting from our investments in sustainability.
Okay, good. And one of the things raised there, Maarten, as well, was you mentioned transparency. We're beginning to get a huge amount of data now coming into the market. I think something ridiculous like 10 times or 20 times more in the last 2 years than there's ever been before. Is there an opportunity to use that in order to create some of these standards and maybe drive this a little further forward?
Yes, and yes. If you look at the conversations we currently have with our members, but also with other organizations, it's very clear that people don't expect people to be accredited, but also systems potentially going forward. And people clearly see a role for RICS in doing so. Having said that, it's all fine and good to talk about those data. There's also a clear downside to data. Who owns those data? What are people going to do with it? And I think we don't discuss enough yet about all this. We only look at the benefits of data, the opportunities, but not enough, I believe, towards the threats.
Okay, all right, good. Obviously, you're collecting data in the retail sector, presumably on consumers, but also the activity of shoppers, and in order to help your clients, your guests, I suppose, in that sense, in the shopping centres, in the high streets. Are there sort of concrete ways that you can give me kind of, in terms of how that data could maybe used in terms of encouraging sustainability and sustainability of the investments, but also, I guess, concrete ones of how your strategy with Link to the City has actually made a difference?
Yeah, those are a lot of questions, Richard.
Sorry.
No, to go back to the first, how could we use data? Yeah, we collect data about our energy efficiency, water management, etc. From the individual assets that we manage, bearing in mind that 55%, even slightly more, of our assets are high street assets, so they're standalone assets with one retail tenant in it. It's very hard to manage or try and influence the environment of the building. But what we did in the past is collect the data and share that publicly to see which category of tenant was doing what with water management or energy management. So you could really focus on which sector was doing not so well in the retail categories. Now we don't want to, make them look bad, but it also creates a bit of awareness of where you can start as a retailer. That's our challenge, to cooperate with the retailer to improve the building's quality and future-proofing it. So we need to really use that to work together. So that's how we use data on our side.
Okay, good. I wanted to just pick up with you, Nicole. Obviously you have a number of funds, but you've also elected to do some that are specifically sustainability funds. Do you think there's more opportunity to do that in order to highlight this issue, that there's actually maybe untapped demand in some ways for more funds that exclusively do look at these criteria?
Yeah, I would say yes, there is a demand for it, and I think because like the reaction we get from all the investors on our sustainable funds is always positive, and everybody wants to join, like everybody. But so I think there will be a lot more demand for sustainable funds. We think so, and we are working on it to get our monitoring system better, to get our investments better, to be prepared for the future.
Okay, good.
I think you can turn it around. If your fund is not sustainable, you won't have any investors left.
Just on open data as well, Richard, that's another project that we've got in Scotland, looking at the use of public information. One of the simple things that we do with it is we've got a free Wi-Fi system in our city. People log on through Facebook, we immediately know where they're from, we know what age they are, and we can monitor as well how long they're in the city centre and what they're doing, and even the way that they're walking around the city centre to try and improve things like signage. So there are some really practical examples that you can do with open data.
And just to pick up that point, we had quite a lot in terms of when it was looking at human capital and wellness on smart cities and how it will be able to monitor what you're doing, how well you are, what your blood pressure is, what your, all of these things, and also but monitor air quality in offices. Just the expectation that people have, and that what a city can do to maintain a healthy and focused group of people in a way that you're not going to lose downtime from work because people are ill, that actually the city is built around creating a healthy population and a place that people want to live. Is that a really practical kind of thing, or is this sort of, kind of Star Trek way ahead?
I think that may well be within us more quickly than we think in terms of the way that cities react to data. I mean, another example we've got is that we have to go out and monitor in public buildings water quality, and that's used to be done by someone going around testing it. Sensors in that water system can tell us that data practically every second if we want it, and that can improve things like diseases like Legionella, which of course nobody wants to have. So that's a good example. Another one is just when in the winter time when the roads need icing, if you have sensors in there, they'll tell you what the temperatures are, and then you can go out and do it. And that can be done in real time. So there are some real advantages, I think. And cities that are doing that, particularly in Scandinavia, they're already developing the technologies. We're trying to do it in Scotland. They're developing the technologies, they're creating whole new industries, and that of course brings demand for property and for investment.
We are doing more or less the same on building level, so collecting from all our buildings water usage, energy use, and it allows us also to compare different buildings with each other, seeing possibilities where to invest a little extra to reduce the energy use, to reduce sewage, to reduce water use. So the data is really helping to improve our individual buildings by comparing them.
I mean, there was an interesting one that we had before, just on a very kind of micro level almost, which was that instead of having to change lights every year or whatever, bulbs, because it's easier, more effective to have a team come in and do it, that actually it can just highlight when it's about to fail. And so you don't need to do all of them, you just do them as they're needed. And so it becomes a very different level, almost like having a concierge with you, in whether it's in a shopping centre or an office or residential, that it's more like that kind of thing. Is that something that your tenants are looking for in retail?
Yeah, I think they are, but they are looking for it on a different level. That's, I think, one of the, as I said, challenges is to create a certain the same objective, retailers and us as investors, how can we make life more easy for our retail tenants and work with us to make the overall performance of the building higher and to make it more sustainable. That's why we have a sort of innovation challenge where we ask startups to help us create solutions that will, Boris mentioned, solutions to not only measure but also to really keep down water usage or manage the energy levels and use one of our buildings as a sort of playground or living lab. So we've invited them to work with us to do that, because obviously we are not the technology companies, but we would like to help our tenants to get to that point that they say, okay, I'm getting what you would like to do, and you give me the solutions that do that. So.
Okay, good. I just wanted to check to see if anybody's got any questions that they'd like to ask or any comments they want to make. If so, raise your hand and just let me know. I've got a kind of a sort of final question for you here. We've talked about a lot of those areas about how the cities should be collaborating with investors, are collaborating with some investors, that there's an option obviously to create transparency, to create maybe a role for the RICS in this in terms of benchmarking. So let's just have a look at what are the future and the next steps. So, and this is a question for everybody, and we'll start maybe with you, Priscilla, and finish with you, Boris, which is, what's the next step, I guess, for measuring performance, and then how do we use that to drive this sort of long-term, sustainable investment that everybody is looking for? Priscilla.
Question. I think it starts with agreeing on what sustainable investment is and how do we actually measure it. It comes with a lot of talking to each other and creating transparency, because that's not always there, and finding each other in the I think common overall goal. For us, that means as an investor in high street, a lot of it in high street is really find out what other owners in these areas are doing and how we can commonly create something that will do better for the whole area. And the other challenge is to engage with our retail tenants and find the same, let's say, horizons to move on.
Okay, great, Maarten.
First of all, I think there are already a significant number of tools that can be used to measure performance, and they are being improved all the time. So from that perspective, I don't think we need all the time new tools to be developed. Talking about, well, how do we take this forward? For me, it's very critical, especially when you talk about urbanization and cities, is what I call urban governance, making sure that all the parties that benefit or that are stakeholders in the city, that they're also actively being involved in the discussion about how the world should look like going forward. So it's not just investors and municipalities or governments, it's also the tenants, but also the occupants and the people that live there or work there or shop there, basically.
Okay, good, thank you. Nicole.
That's my opinion too. We don't only have to look on the investors, we have to look on the users, what is sustainable for them, what do they need in the future. Maybe we have to adjust sometimes the definition of sustainability, and I think the main focus for the future is to have implement sustainable management for all the properties, to keep them sustainable, to make them better for the future.
Okay, great, thank you. Stuart.
Yeah, I think Maarten did it on the head in terms of collaboration across the public and private sector to make sure that what's being done is achieving the goals set out, particularly around sustainability themes. I think in Scotland we've got some really good examples of collaboration across the public and private sector, and really what we're here to do is to say, if you've got some ideas around sustainability, if you want to test them out, Scotland's a good place to do it. We're very open for business in that regard. Maarten's laughing, he's promoting our product later, which I'm very pleased about. We're here to do business, and we're here to make sure that people get a good appreciation of the sustainability goals that Scotland has as well.
Great, Boris.
Well, I think the next step is that we as a society, we don't accept non-sustainable buildings. When we looked in the Netherlands, a non-sustainable office is not allowed to be used from off 2023. I think we should have the same legislation, not only for offices, but also for renting houses and also for shopping centers. So let's say from 2025 we only have sustainable buildings in our country. So I think the next thing is we as a society say we only want to have sustainable real estate.
Okay, great.